Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We're tackling a topic today that's pretty personal for a lot of folks out there, supporting loved ones with dementia,
Yeah.
especially at mealtimes.
Oh, it's such a common challenge, and we're here to kind of help sort through, the decisions and emotions that come with it.
We're actually using a decision aid to guide us today, and
Yeah.
one thing that really stood out to me was that feeding tubes, which a lot of people think is the answer, right?
Right.
They don't actually extend life for folks with dementia,
Yeah. It's a real game changer.
isn't it?
It is. It makes you rethink things and really look at, quality of life versus just extending life no matter what.
You know what I think is interesting is that this realization, this fact, it opens up a whole new conversation about how we think about care. We're not talking about a cure here. We're talking about comfort and dignity.
So, okay, let's break this down a little bit. Dementia affects so much more than just memory loss. It impacts someone's ability to swallow, to recognize hunger, even to use utensils. Exactly. And all of that can lead to a lot of anxiety and frustration for the person with dementia. And that just makes mealtime stressful for everyone. I mean, imagine trying to eat when you're not even sure how to or why you should be eating.
Oh, it's just heartbreaking to think about. And for caregivers, the guilt and the worry must be just overwhelming.
You're absolutely right. There's this natural instinct to want to nourish our loved ones, right? And when that becomes a struggle, it's really easy to feel like you're failing. But this decision aid emphasizes something really important. You're not alone in this. These are decisions that are best made in partnership with your healthcare providers who can assess each individual's needs.
That's such a relief to hear. Honestly, it takes some of the pressure off knowing there's, experts out there to guide us.
Yeah.
So what are the options? What are the paths forward here?
Well, the decision aid outlines two main options: assisted eating by mouth or feeding tube. And each option has its own set of considerations, and the best choice, it really depends on the individual's circumstances and their values.
Assisted eating definitely feels like the more natural approach. It's the way we've always cared for our loved ones.
It does, doesn't it? And it often allows for that continued connection, and dignity around mealtimes. But it also requires a pretty significant commitment from the caregiver. So let's take a closer look at what that really entails.
Okay, let's get practical. What does assisting with eating actually look like day to day?
Well, it can be a range of things. For some people, it might just be offering verbal cues and encouragement. For others, it might involve hand feeding or using adaptive utensils.
And what about the food itself? Are there certain modifications that make eating easier and safer?
Often, yes. Adjusting the texture and the consistency can make a huge difference. So things like pureeing foods or thickening liquids, or even incorporating nutritional supplements can help. Ensure those kinds of things.
So it's not just about getting calories in. It's really about making the experience, manageable and even enjoyable for the person with dementia.
That's a really key takeaway. Mealtimes should be about more than just sustenance. They're an opportunity for social interaction, for pleasure, for maintaining a sense of normalcy. But, and this is where the caregiver's perspective is so important, it's not without its challenges.
And that's where that potential for burnout comes in, right?
Exactly. Assisting with every meal. It can be physically and emotionally exhausting, especially if you're doing it all alone. So it's really crucial for caregivers to have their own support system, whether that's family, friends, or even respite care, just to avoid burnout.
Which brings us to that other option, feeding tubes. And I got to say, it's a decision that feels so much heavier, much more emotionally charged.
You're hitting on something really important there. There is so much emotion tied up in this decision. And oftentimes I think there are misconceptions about what a feeding tube actually does. We talked about that study earlier, and this might surprise some people. Feeding tubes don't prevent aspiration.
That is surprising. I think a lot of people assume that that's like the main reason for a feeding tube.
It seems logical, but aspiration's a complex issue. Even liquids can move upward from the stomach. And a feeding tube doesn't eliminate that risk. So if a feeding tube isn't a guaranteed solution, what should guide our thinking when we're faced with this choice?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Where do we even begin?
Well, the decision aid, it really highlights how important it is to consider the individual's wishes. Have they ever expressed any preferences about their end-of-life care? Do they have a living will that addresses this?
And what if those conversations never happened? What if their wishes are unclear?
Then the focus shifts to their current quality of life. How severe are their swallowing difficulties? Are mealtimes causing them distress? And really importantly, how would a feeding tube impact their mobility, their ability to interact, their overall comfort?
It almost becomes like a balancing act,
Yeah,
weighing the potential benefits against the potential burdens.
exactly. And we have to kind of debunk this myth that a feeding tube is always the kindest option. Sometimes it can actually diminish quality of life. It can lead to discomfort, complications, even limitations on where someone can receive care.
This is heavy stuff. It's clear there are no easy answers.
And that's okay. What matters most is that we approach this decision with compassion, clarity, and a deep understanding of the individual's needs and values. And we'll talk more about that right after this.
We're back, and as we go through this decision aid, I'm really struck by how much it emphasizes the emotional weight of these choices. It's not just a medical decision, it's deeply personal.
It really is. And it's easy to feel so lost,
Yeah.
in all the emotions, especially when you're faced with a decision that could, significantly change your loved one's life. You just start second guessing everything. Am I doing the right thing? What would they want? Well, that's so common. This decision aid, it encourages us to take a step back from all the anxieties and really consider, the individual's values and preferences. Like if they could tell us what they wanted, what would they say?
That's a powerful question. But sometimes it feels impossible to know. Dementia can make those conversations so hard.
Yeah.
How do we make sure we're really acting in their best interest?
Yeah.
When we might not even know what those interests are.
That's where ongoing communication with your healthcare team is so important. This decision aid stresses that again and again. Doctors and nurses, they can offer such valuable insights based on, their medical expertise and their observations of your loved one's condition.
So it's not just about making a one-time decision, it's about staying in communication, adapting the care plan as things change.
Exactly. Dementia is progressive and needs can change really quickly. So staying connected with your healthcare team, it helps make sure you're making informed choices every step of the way.
But I can imagine those conversations can be really daunting. What kind of questions should caregivers be asking? Where do we even start?
Well, that's where the decision aid is really helpful. It actually provides a list of really practical questions to guide those conversations with doctors and nurses. Things like, is the cause of the eating problem likely to improve? Or will a feeding tube restrict where my loved one can receive care?
Those are really practical considerations.
Yeah.
It helps to make it feel more manageable,
Yeah.
We're not just talking about these abstract concepts. We're talking about the actual day-to-day realities of caring for someone with dementia.
Absolutely. And there are some questions that are more emotionally focused too, like, does my loved one seem to enjoy eating? That really gets to the heart of, quality of life.
It's about recognizing that even with dementia, even with the challenges of eating, there can still be those moments of pleasure and connection.
Right. And on the flip side, the decision aid also encourages caregivers to ask themselves some tough questions, like, are you feeling pressured by family? Are you struggling to reconcile your own beliefs with what you think your loved one might want?
It's about acknowledging that this whole situation is really complex emotionally.
Yeah.
And recognizing that it's okay to need support ourselves.
Exactly. Making these kinds of decisions for someone else can be incredibly draining. There's no shame in reaching out for support, whether that's therapists, support groups, or just trusted friends and family. It's essential to have a space to process these emotions and make sure you're not carrying this burden all alone.
I think there's so much fear around asking for help. Like it means we're not strong enough, or that we're somehow failing as caregivers.
That couldn't be further from the truth. Reaching out for support is a sign of strength. It's a sign that you're truly committed to providing the best possible care for your loved one. And the truth is there are so many resources out there to help you on this journey.
That is reassuring to hear. So as we think about these two paths, assisted eating and feeding tubes, it sounds like the key takeaway is that there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
That's really important to remember. What works for one person might be totally wrong for another. It's about finding the best possible path for that individual at that specific moment in time and being open to the idea that things might change, that the path might need to be adjusted as you go.
And that's where compassion comes in. It's about recognizing that this is a journey and that both you and your loved one deserve grace and understanding every step of the way.
I love that. Even in the midst of all the challenges, all the difficult decisions, there are still those opportunities for connection, for love, for, those moments of shared humanity.
Those moments, even the small ones, they're what make it all worthwhile. But dementia, it's progressive by its very nature. And that's something that can be really hard to face, even when you understand it intellectually.
It is hard.
Mm.
But this decision aid, it also talks about, the natural progression of dementia and how as the disease progresses, the body's systems start to shut down. It reminds us that stopping eating and drinking is often a natural part of dying.
I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. It's
Yeah.
so easy to feel like we're failing somehow if our loved one stops eating, like we're not doing enough.
It's a very natural feeling, but it's important to remember that this is a biological process. It's not a personal failing. It's something that happens in a lot of illnesses, not just dementia.
So it's not necessarily a sign that we haven't provided enough care.
Not at all. It's just part of life's natural cycle. And it allows us to shift our focus, from trying to prolong life no matter what to ensuring a peaceful and dignified end.
That's such a powerful way to reframe it. It takes some of the pressure off
Mm.
and allows us to focus on what truly matters in those final moments.
Exactly. It's about making sure the person is comfortable, pain-free, surrounded by their loved ones. Gentle touch, familiar voices, maybe their favorite music playing softly in the background.
Creating that space of peace and love as they transition to whatever comes next.
And even in those final moments, there's still that opportunity for deep connection and love. It's about being present, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually.
It's about honoring their journey and cherishing the time we have left.
Beautifully said. Today, we've really explored the many sides of supporting loved ones with dementia at mealtimes. From understanding the changes that dementia brings to navigating the complexities of assisted eating and feeding tubes, we've covered a lot.
We've talked about the emotional impact these decisions have on both the person with dementia and their caregivers. And we've stressed how important it is to find support, ask questions, and advocate for your loved one's needs every step of the way. It feels like we've been through a lot today, from confusion and anxiety to a place of, understanding and peace.
It is a journey, and hopefully this decision aid has helped bring some clarity, maybe even a sense of empowerment. Knowledge is power, and the more we understand dementia, the better equipped we are to make these tough choices.
What really sticks with me is this idea of respecting the person's values, even as the dementia progresses. It's easy to get caught up in our own ideas of what's best,
Yeah.
but it's not really about us, is it?
No, it's not. It's about honoring their journey, their wishes, even when those wishes are hard to hear or accept. It's about recognizing their dignity and making sure their voice is heard, even as their ability to communicate, starts to fade.
And that's got to be incredibly hard, especially when you're facing the reality of losing someone you love. It's like constantly trying to balance your head and your heart.
It is, and there's no right or wrong way to handle those emotions. But this decision aid, it at least gives us a framework for thinking through these issues. It doesn't shy away from the hard stuff. It acknowledges that there might be conflict, the emotional toll on caregivers, the importance of self-care.
It's an honest approach. So often these conversations are, full of euphemisms and people avoiding the topic. But this resource puts it all out there, creates a space for real dialogue and reflection. It's like it gives us permission to have those difficult conversations.
You said it perfectly, and that's what makes it so valuable. It's not just information, it's support. It's saying, hey, you're not alone in this. These are tough choices, and it's okay to feel confused, overwhelmed, even angry.
That sense of shared humanity makes all the difference, knowing that other people have gone through this, that there's a whole community of caregivers who understand what this is like.
And that community is so important. Don't be afraid to reach out. Ask for help. Whether it's healthcare providers, support groups, therapists, anyone who can offer guidance, and just listen. Remember, asking for help is a strength, not a weakness.
It's like they say you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself if you want to take care of others. And that can be the hardest part sometimes.
I know it can. But it's so important. You deserve compassion and care just like the person you're caring for. And by taking care of yourself, you're modeling that compassion for your loved one, showing them it's okay to need help, to be vulnerable.
As we wrap up, I keep thinking about one line from the decision aid. You are their voice when they cannot speak for themselves. It's a huge responsibility, but also an honor to be able to advocate for someone you love.
And that advocacy takes many forms. It's speaking up for their needs, honoring their wishes, making sure their final days are filled with dignity and comfort and love. It's remembering that they're still a person deserving of respect and care, even when the disease is trying to take that away.
It's about cherishing the memories, celebrating their life, and finding peace in the midst of loss, knowing that your love and care made a difference.
Beautifully said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this is giving you something to think about, some tools to help you on this journey, and maybe even a little bit of hope. Remember, you're not alone.
There's a whole community out there walking this path with you. And
Even though dementia brings challenges, there's still room for love connection, meaning until next time, take care of yourselves and keep those conversations going.